You might think pirates spent most of their time crossing swords and hunting for buried treasure. But their greatest enemy was not a royal navy, a rival crew, or some cursed island on a faded map. It was something much simpler. Clean drinking water. Let me tell you something funny about sea travel in the 18th century. Ships could carry enough salted meat and hardtack to feed a crew for months. But water? That was a different story. Water turned into a disgusting soup of algae and bacteria faster than you could say, yo-ho-ho. A single pirate needed at least 1 gallon of water a day just to survive under the blazing Caribbean sun. For a crew of 50 men, that meant 50 gallons every single day. No wonder fresh water could become more valuable than gold. And here is where things get interesting. And honestly, a little gross. Some desperate pirates really did try drinking seawater when their fresh water ran out. Bad idea. Very bad idea. Ocean water is far saltier than the human body can handle. When you drink it, you are basically telling your kidneys, "Hey, time to work overtime." Your body spends more water trying to flush out the extra salt than you gained by drinking it in the first place. Pirates learned that lesson the hard way. And let us be honest, it was not a pleasant sight. I once read about a pirate ship that went several days with almost no fresh water. Some of the crew were so tortured by thirst that they started drinking seawater mixed with wine, thinking the alcohol would make it safe. Spoiler, it did not. Most of them became violently ill, and their situation only got worse. You would think someone would have come up with a better solution. But remember, this was long before plastic containers, modern filters, or compact water purification systems. The best they could do was store water in the coolest part of the ship, usually down in the hold below the deck. Even there, heat, humidity, wooden barrels, and constant rolling turned fresh water into a limited and fragile treasure. Sometimes the problem became so serious that pirates changed their entire route just because they had heard about a freshwater spring on some random island. Imagine being the most feared pirates in the Caribbean and still having to make a detour because all you really want is one clean drink of water. Not exactly the terrifying image from the movies. Speaking of terrifying reputations, there is a lesser-known side of the infamous Blackbeard. Everyone knows the story of him putting slow-burning fuses in his beard to scare his enemies. But fewer people talk about how smart he was when it came to water. He targeted ships he knew were carrying fresh water along with other cargo. Clever, right? But when things became truly desperate, pirates turned to the most reliable backup plan of all: the sky. Believe me, when rain clouds appeared on the horizon, you had never seen a crew move so fast. As soon as a storm rolled in, the entire ship turned into one giant water-collecting machine. The deck became busier than a fish market on sale day. Pirates had real systems for catching rain. The sails, those huge sheets of canvas normally used to catch the wind, could be angled into giant funnels. During a storm, sailors would shift the sails in special ways to create channels for rainwater. Sometimes they even argued over who got which sail, because everyone knew the forward sails collected the cleanest water. Less bird mess, if you know what I mean. The clever part was that almost every surface of the ship could be used. Wooden rails, grooves, and deck edges that normally guided seawater away could suddenly become little highways for fresh rainwater. The water would run down into waiting barrels. Some especially inventive pirates even carved extra channels into the deck planks to guide more water toward their collection points. But it was not all smooth sailing. Pun absolutely intended. Rain collection had its own problems. The first drops that hit the ship were usually filthy. Birds had been using the sails for weeks. Salt spray had coated everything. Dust, grime, and whatever else lived on a pirate ship all washed down together. Smart pirates waited a few minutes before filling the barrels. They let the first rain rinse the ship clean. They called it letting the deck take a bath. Here is a strange little detail most history books skip. During heavy storms, pirates might run around the deck holding their hats upside down to catch extra water. Some even took off their shirts, soaked them in the rain, and wrung them out into barrels. One report from a Spanish merchant ship described pirates looking like they were performing some kind of bizarre rain dance. In reality, they were just trying to squeeze every possible drop out of the sky. But rain could not be trusted forever. Sometimes ships went weeks without a single cloud. That is when pirates became truly creative about saving water. Water rationing rules were often stricter than rules for battle or sharing loot. Breaking the water rules could get you into more trouble than stealing from the captain. There is a good story about a pirate ship called the Morning Star. During one storm, the crew collected enough rainwater to extend their voyage by 2 full weeks. They celebrated with what they called a rain feast. And by feast, I mean everyone got an extra ration of water. Today, that sounds ridiculous. Back then, it was better than finding a chest full of gold. The best sailors even learned to predict where rain might appear by watching clouds and seabirds. They would shift course just to pass through an area where they expected a storm to break. Sometimes it starts to feel like the fiercest pirates in the Caribbean were also amateur meteorologists. But despite all those tricks with rainwater, the sky sometimes stayed stubbornly clear. When the barrels ran dry and the clouds refused to come, pirates turned into water hunters on land. Forget treasure maps. The most valuable maps in a pirate collection often marked freshwater springs, rivers, and safe places to refill barrels. Those water maps were guarded more carefully than stories about buried treasure. And for good reason. A good water source could mean the difference between life and death. One of the first things a pirate learned was how to read the landscape. Green plants mattered, but not just any green plants. Coconut palms might look tropical and promising, but they could grow in surprisingly dry soil. Ferns and thick grasses were better signs. They needed steady moisture. Some experienced pirates learned to spot certain vines and flowering plants because they often grew near hidden water. The island itself became a clue. And now we get to one of the smartest tricks. Pirates became surprisingly good at digging what we would now call seepage wells. They would dig holes in the sand a short distance back from the shoreline. Slowly, those holes could fill with filtered fresh water from underground. The sand acted like a natural filter, helping block salt water while allowing fresher groundwater to seep in. Pretty clever for people who spent most of their careers breaking the law. But my favorite method is what I like to call the bird trick. Pirates watched birds, especially early in the morning and late in the day. Birds need to drink too, and they often travel to water at predictable times. If a flock of birds kept flying in one direction, there was a decent chance they were heading toward a water source. One pirate captain supposedly wrote that his best water source was found by following a flock of parrots. He also complained that the parrots screamed the entire way, as if they were making fun of him. Sometimes pirates became so desperate that they attacked coastal towns for one reason only: water. Picture the most feared pirates in the Caribbean storming ashore, not to steal gold, jewels, or silver plates, but to haul away barrels of drinking water. There is even a funny story about a crew that raided a Spanish settlement and took every water barrel they could find. Then they apparently felt so guilty that they left behind a small bag of gold coins as payment. It seems even pirates had occasional attacks of conscience. The real experts learned to read the land itself. They looked for V-shaped valleys where streams often ran. In rocky areas, they searched for dark streaks on cliff faces, signs that water was seeping through the stone. Some pirates even claimed they could smell water from a distance. Though to be fair, it might have just been the rum talking. Some crews kidnapped local guides who knew where hidden springs were located, but this often turned into a comedy of errors. One captured guide led a pirate crew in circles for 3 days before they realized he was simply mocking them. Another guide really did lead pirates to a water source, but that source turned out to be home to a very angry group of crocodiles. After a few lessons like that, many pirates decided it was better to befriend local people than to force them to help. One of the cleverest techniques I have heard about was dew catching. Pirates dug sloped pits and lined them with large leaves. At dawn, dew would collect on the leaves and run down into containers. The amount was small, but when you are desperate for fresh water, every drop matters. But finding water was only half the problem. You also had to store it. And the wooden barrels pirates used were far from perfect. The real enemy was not the barrel itself, but what started growing inside it after a few weeks at sea. Pirates often used large hogshead-style barrels that could hold around 60 gallons each. A mid-sized ship needed dozens of these monsters to last through a long voyage. That meant thousands of gallons sloshing around in the hold, slowly warming, sweating, and changing. Heat, humidity, and wooden walls created the perfect incubator for all kinds of unpleasant life. Pirates called spoiled water living water because tiny creatures were literally swimming in it. One old account describes every sip as feeling like swallowing a handful of wriggling worms. Appetizing, right? But pirates came up with plenty of tricks to fight living water. One of the best was charring the inside of the barrels. They burned the inner layer of wood until it turned black, creating something like a rough charcoal barrier. Funny enough, that same basic idea is still used in barrels for whiskey today. Though pirates were probably not thinking about aged bourbon. Pirates also discovered that tossing a few silver coins into a barrel could help water stay fresher for longer. They did not understand bacteria, but they believed silver had some kind of mysterious cleansing power. Modern science shows they were actually on the right track. Silver has natural antibacterial properties. So in a way, they really did find gold in silver. The most careful crews sealed barrel seams with mixtures of tar, resin, and whatever else they could find. Some developed secret recipes for waterproofing: beeswax, pitch, coconut oil, plant gum. Every captain seemed to have his own special method. One captain supposedly guarded his sealant recipe so fiercely that he made the crew turn around while he coated the barrel seams. When the British finally captured him, they allegedly offered him a lighter sentence if he revealed the formula. He refused. He took the secret of his barrel sealant to the grave. Temperature mattered too. Pirates quickly learned that water spoiled more slowly in the coolest part of the ship. But there was another problem. The lowest hold was also where barrels rolled and shifted the most during rough seas. So the choice was simple. Drink slightly less rotten water, or spend your life chasing giant barrels that rolled around the hold like bowling pins during an earthquake. One inventive crew wrapped their water barrels in wet sailcloth, hoping evaporation would cool them. In theory, not a bad idea. In practice, they mostly created moldy cloth and water that still went bad. Another crew painted its barrels white to reflect heat. Then they learned that old white paint often contained lead. Yes, the water seemed to last longer, but for all the wrong reasons. Some of the funniest preservation attempts came from superstitious pirates who believed bad water was caused by evil spirits. They held little blessing rituals around new barrels, complete with singing and dancing. One crew even hired a water witch to charm their supplies. Strangely enough, their water actually did stay fresh longer. Probably because the witch secretly added charcoal to the barrel. But even with all this cleverness, pirates still had to deal with sour, slimy, foul water. When the liquid in the barrels turned green and started moving on its own, they needed a backup plan. That is where homemade filtration came in. Pirate do-it-yourself water filters ranged from surprisingly practical to hilariously desperate. Have you ever tried filtering water through your own hat? Pirates did. I would not recommend drinking anything that is passed through a pirate hat. The most basic pirate water filter was simple. Take a piece of cloth, or whatever passed for clean cloth on a pirate ship, stretch it over a container, and pour the slimy water through it. This caught the larger pieces, tiny worms, floating algae, bits of debris, and anything else you did not want crunching between your teeth. One pirate wrote that after filtering, the cloth turned so green it looked as if seaweed had sewn itself into his best shirt. Some pirates tried to copy what they saw on tropical islands, where water filtered naturally through sand and rock. They built small layered filters using whatever they had: broken pottery, crushed shells, coral fragments, sand, and charcoal. One captain swore that water tasted better if it passed through crushed pearl necklaces. Expensive filter. Very pirate. Some crews even tried desalinating seawater by boiling it and collecting the steam. They hung cloth over pots of boiling seawater, waited for condensation to soak the fabric, and then wrung the cloth into clean containers. Did it work? A little. Was it worth it? Not usually. Fuel was precious. Firewood was limited, and after all that effort, they might produce only a small cup of fresh water. The award for most desperate filtering method goes to the crew that tried running water through tobacco leaves, believing tobacco would kill germs. Spoiler, the water ended up tasting like liquid from the bottom of an ashtray. Honestly, they might have had better luck smoking the water. And, knowing pirates, somebody probably tried. When pirates managed to get citrus fruit, they sometimes squeezed lime or lemon juice into filtered water. This was not just pirate lemonade. The acidity could help reduce some harmful growth, and the citrus helped prevent scurvy. 2 problems with 1 lime. Unfortunately, most pirates had no idea why it worked. They only noticed that crews drinking lime water seemed to get sick less often. The most reliable cleaning method was also the simplest. Time. If you left bad water sitting in a clean container long enough, much of the unpleasant material settled to the bottom. Pirates called this sleeping water because they let it rest before drinking it. Was it scientific? Not really. But when you are in the middle of the ocean with nothing but sky and waves around you, good enough starts to look pretty good. Speaking of questionable water, some pirates chose a completely different approach when their supplies began to spoil. This method was not exactly pleasant, but it saved countless lives at sea. Rum. Most people think pirates drank rum only because they wanted to get drunk. That is only half the story. In many cases, they were trying to survive. Rum worked like a crude water treatment tool. When mixed with water to make grog, it helped make foul water more drinkable and sometimes safer. Add a splash of lime juice, and suddenly you had hydration, alcohol, and a little protection against scurvy in one rough sailor's drink. Congratulations! You have invented a pirate water treatment plant. A basic grog mixture was simple. 1 part rum, several parts water, and lime juice if the crew was lucky. It was not exactly a tropical cocktail, but compared with worm-filled barrel water, it was luxury. However, grog was not actually invented by pirates. It came from the British Royal Navy, especially Admiral Edward Vernon, who was nicknamed Old Grog because of the grogram cloak he wore. Pirates, being pirates, borrowed the idea. Along with plenty of other things. The math behind grog is surprisingly interesting. A pirate ship with around 50 crew members could go through a huge amount of rum in a single week just to stretch and improve the water supply. Of course, some of that rum mysteriously disappeared before it reached the grog barrel. Pirates called it the angel's share. Apparently, those angels had a serious drinking problem. Different captains had their own grog recipes. Some added sugar to soften the taste. Others used spices like nutmeg or cinnamon. One especially inventive captain supposedly added mint and called it a Caribbean drink. Sounds like he was a couple of centuries early to the mojito. Clever captains used grog rations to control how much water the crew drank. Every sailor received a specific daily amount. Too much pure water would vanish quickly or spoil faster. Grog lasted longer, tasted better, and helped enforce rationing. It was basically a drink ticket system. Except instead of stopping drunk customers from ordering another shot, it stopped thirsty pirates from draining the entire water supply in one afternoon. There is a hilarious account from a captured merchant sailor who described pirates arguing over their grog ration. One pirate tried to convince the captain that he deserved extra because he was twice as thirsty as normal men. The captain replied, "Then you can stay twice as thirsty on the same ration as everyone else." Pirates might have been criminals, but when it came to grog distribution, they could be strangely democratic. Not everyone loved grog, though. Some complained that it made bad water taste even worse. Others said it made them sleepy, which was not ideal when they were supposed to be on watch looking for enemy sails. Merchant crews had their own problems with grog, too. On one ship, the crew allegedly came close to mutiny when the captain watered it down too much. Apparently, the line between water purification and revolution can be very thin. The most interesting part of grog was not the drink itself. It was how important it became to shipboard life. The daily grog ration became part of the rhythm of the vessel. You did not start a major fight before grog time. You did not plan anything serious before everyone had their share. And you definitely did not mess with the ration. In the end, despite all their tricks, rain collection, island springs, seepage wells, barrel charring, silver coins, cloth filters, citrus juice, and grog, pirates were constantly fighting for clean water. And that is what made them so inventive. With nothing but wooden barrels, scraps of cloth, a few silver coins, a little charcoal, and a dangerous amount of rum, they managed to survive for months at sea. Not because they were romantic heroes, but because every day, before treasure, before battle, and before glory, they had to solve the oldest problem in the ocean. How do you stay alive when you are surrounded by water you cannot drink?